Hello, this is Ed Chapman, and this video cast is going to start the process of explaining how cellular respiration and fermentation take place. And it's a good thing to remember that what we're basically talking about here is how do living cells convert food to an energy form that can be used to do work inside the cell. And the organelle most commonly associated with cellular respiration is, of course, the mighty mitochondria, okay, which I found this really cool picture of and decided to make it the background. So, or actually, it's a mitochondrion because it's only one of them. If you make it an A at the end, that means there's more than one. So let's look at what's going on here. First of all, please remember that energy flows in ecosystems, but it does not recycle. Chemicals recycle. So this is an important fact because energy is ultimately always leaving ecosystems as heat. It's kind of leaking out all the time because of that second law of thermodynamics. And because of this, the energy has to be constantly replaced. Kind of graphically, this is a good way to think about it. If you think of light energy coming in to the Earth or to the biosphere, to all the ecosystems, it's going to be processed by plants inside their chloroplasts. And what's going to happen is this energy is going to be captured in a way that allows these two chemicals to be combined into organic molecules. Okay, now when that happens, oxygen is left over. So oxygen is going to be kicked out as a byproduct. And then what happens is these organic molecules can be processed by another organelle called mitochondria to produce ATP energy, which is the energy that can do work. And that process is always going to be losing some energy as heat, okay, because the system is going to heat up. And a byproduct of this is, of course, is carbon dioxide and water. And the cycle keeps going around and around with carbon dioxide and water being recycled through the system, but energy having to be constantly added back in to keep the cycle going. Okay, so this ATP energy can be then used to do work, and in the process of doing work, again, we're going to release more heat. So do you see how energy does not recycle? It's coming in and it's leaving, whereas carbon dioxide and water, or carbon, oxygen, and hydrogens, are always recycling. Now, the branch of metabolism that breaks down large molecules to release energy is called catabolism. So we'll refer to these as catabolic pathways. And these catabolic pathways are going to be yielding energy in the form of ATP by oxidizing organic fuels. And oxidation at its simplest means to combine with oxygen. Okay? So what's going to happen is we're going to bring oxygen in and release some energy in the form of ATP. And remember, of course, you always get some heat produced too. There are two ways to break down food molecules. Okay, over here we have all the different types of molecules that come in food that contain energy or calories. Okay, all these things contain calories. Lipids are by far the most dense in calories, followed by carbohydrates like starches and sugars, and there is energy in proteins too. And there's two ways to get this energy out, or these calories out. You can use oxygen in aerobic respiration if you have O2. So if oxygen's available, a lot of cells can do this way. Aerobic respiration, that's most frequently associated with mitochondria. Mitochondria are aerobic respirators in a way. They combine oxygen, they take in food molecules, combine them with oxygen, and produce a lot of ATP. You can also run these food molecules anaerobically through a different type of respiration, which generally happens in the cytoplasm, to produce a little bit or a lot less energy, but again, you don't need oxygen for anaerobic, because anaerobic means no oxygen required. This is very ancient. Okay, this has been going on for a long time. Bacteria can do anaerobic respiration. Okay, so it's an ancient process, takes place in bacteria, which were the first life forms to evolve, and another name for anaerobic respiration is fermentation. Okay, you probably heard of things that ferment. Okay, that's doing respiration without using oxygen. Fermentations. We'll talk more about them a little bit later. So, what is this idea of oxidation? Well, chemically, what's happening when you oxidize something is you're stripping electrons away from it. So, an easy way to remember this is oil. It's because oxidation is loss. Okay, so if you take the first letters, okay, O, I, L, we get oil. So oxidation is the loss of electrons from a molecule, and reduction is just the opposite. It's the gain of electrons. Okay, so reduction is gain. So we get rig. So it's a really easy mnemonic to remember, oil rig. Oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. And catabolic reactions, of course, are the oxidizing reactions. They're going to be reducing oxygen by giving it electrons. So oxygen is going to be reduced, and it's going to be, then because it has electrons, it can bond with hydrogen ions to make H2O. Oxidation of food molecules produces a net release of free energy, some of which is captured to make ATP. So that means energetically, oxidation, okay, is a downhill reaction. We have a change in delta G, so we have a negative delta G. And that amount of energy is greater than the energy that it takes to reduce oxygen. So we get a net gain here. Now, everybody has seen this reaction before. You've probably been seeing this since middle school. This is your standard cellular respiration reaction. So this is frequently called the cellular respiration. Okay, and cellular respiration requires oxygen. So we've got oxygen going in. This molecule here, of course, is glucose, C6H12O6, and we've got some products coming out. We've got carbon dioxide, and we've got some water, and we've got some energy. Okay, so what happens here is the carbons in glucose are being oxidized. Okay, so this is the oxidation part of the redox reaction, and the oxygen is being reduced. So this is the reduction. Okay, now I'm hoping you remember, or that you got a lesson in chemistry called redox reactions. Okay, redox is a combination of reduction and oxidation. And whenever something is oxidized, if we're taking electrons away from glucose, they've got to go somewhere. So they're going to the oxygen. So oxygen is being reduced as the glucose is being oxidized. Okay, now glucose is sugar, and sugar doesn't burn in the presence of air. But if you burned it, if you heated it up hot enough to burn, it would release 686 kilocalories per mole of energy. So that means the delta G released is minus 686 kilocalories per mole. Okay, that's a good chunk of energy. But this doesn't happen in air because to make glucose burn, you've got to add some energy of activation. You've got to heat it up. Okay, so if you remember that reaction, glucose, you got to heat it up, you get it hot enough, and then it can fall down to carbon dioxide and water. All right, and that E sub A is what keeps the sugar in your sugar bowls and in your cereal and what's laying around your house from spontaneously combusting. That E sub A, that energy of activation. Now, living cells get the energy out of food, like glucose, in small increments, and they do this in a very interesting way that's evolved over billions of years. They have a special molecule called an electron carrier, which we're going to call NAD+. It's got a long, complicated name that starts with nicotinamide. Don't ever have to know that, but NAD is an electron carrier, which means it's going to be reduced, because remember, reduction is gain. So we're going to be adding electrons to NAD+. And we're then going to be running this NAD with the electrons attached to it through an electron transport chain to make ATP. And how this happens is a subject for the next video cast. Thanks for listening.